Priya Singh was the obedient daughter, Jake Miller the forbidden love, and together, they sparked a secret that would end in a grave beneath Texas soil. What began as a quiet romance turned into a deadly clash of culture, control, and betrayal, unraveling a family's darkest instincts and exposing a crime rooted in honor and silence. Priya Singh was the kind of daughter every traditional Indian family hoped for: soft-spoken, obedient, and academically driven. Living in Plano, Texas, she balanced two worlds: the modern, fast-paced life of an American college student and the deeply rooted expectations of her conservative Punjabi household. Her parents had immigrated to the U.S. in the early 1990s, bringing with them a strict code of honor, discipline, and cultural pride. They ran a modest grocery store in a quiet strip mall, working long hours and saving every dollar to ensure their children had a future shaped by stability and tradition. Priya rarely challenged her parents. She wore modest clothes, cooked with her mother on weekends, and attended temple regularly. Her social media presence was minimal, carefully curated to avoid any hint of rebellion. To outsiders, she was a model of cultural harmony, an Indian daughter thriving in America without losing her roots. But beneath the surface, Priya was quietly suffocating. Her life was mapped out for her: graduate with honors, marry a man chosen by her parents, and settle into a life of quiet obedience. There was no room for deviation, no space for personal dreams. Her younger brother, Arjun, was the enforcer of family values. Though only a year apart, he had absorbed their father's rigid beliefs and often acted as a watchdog. He monitored Priya's behavior, questioned her whereabouts, and reported anything suspicious. Priya learned early on to keep secrets, to smile when she wanted to scream, and to hide her real self behind layers of compliance. Despite the pressure, Priya excelled academically. She was pursuing a degree in biomedical sciences and had dreams of becoming a researcher. But even her ambitions were filtered through her family's lens, acceptable only if they didn't interfere with marriage plans. Her parents had already begun searching for suitors in India, sending her photos and bios of men she had never met. Priya met Jake during her sophomore year at university. He was studying psychology, outgoing and kind, with a quiet confidence that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. Their first interaction was casual, a shared lab assignment, but it quickly grew into something deeper. They began spending time together between classes, walking across campus, exchanging stories about their families, their dreams, and the lives they were quietly building. For Priya, Jake represented everything she wasn't allowed to want: freedom, choice, and emotional safety. She knew from the beginning that her family would never accept him. Jake wasn't Indian, didn't speak Punjabi, and had no connection to the traditions her parents held sacred. But Priya couldn't help herself. She started lying more often, saying she had study groups, volunteering shifts, or late-night exams. In reality, she was with Jake, curled up in his apartment watching documentaries or talking about the future. They never posted photos together, never tagged each other online, and never met in public places where someone from her community might see them. The secrecy became a routine. Priya bought a second phone and used encrypted messaging apps to stay in touch. She created a private email account and kept a small bag of clothes at Jake's place in case she ever needed to leave home quickly. Despite the risks, their relationship flourished. Jake respected her boundaries, never pressured her, and always reminded her that she deserved to live her truth. Priya began to imagine a life beyond her family's control, a life where she could choose love without fear. They talked about moving in together after graduation, maybe even leaving Texas to start fresh somewhere no one knew them. Priya hesitated, torn between loyalty to her parents and the growing desire to escape. She knew the consequences of being discovered could be severe, but the emotional toll of hiding was becoming unbearable. Priya's carefully constructed double life began to unravel with a single oversight. One evening, exhausted from a long day of classes and emotional strain, she forgot to log out of her encrypted messaging app on her laptop. Her younger brother, Arjun, borrowed the device to check his email and stumbled upon a string of messages that shattered the illusion of control their family had maintained. Photos of Priya and Jake, affectionate notes, and plans to move in together were all laid bare. Arjun's reaction was swift and unforgiving. He immediately told their parents, igniting a storm of outrage and disbelief. Her father, already known for his rigid views, saw the relationship as a betrayal, not just of family, but of culture, reputation, and honor. Her mother, though more emotionally conflicted, echoed the same fear, that their daughter's actions would bring shame to the community and ruin any chance of a respectable future. Priya was confronted, accused, and condemned within the walls of her own home. Her phone was confiscated, her laptop locked away, and she was forbidden from leaving the house without supervision. The atmosphere in the house turned suffocating. Priya was no longer treated as a daughter, but as a liability. Her parents spoke in hushed tones, making calls to relatives in India, exploring options to send her away. Arjun became cold and distant, avoiding eye contact and refusing to speak unless it was to enforce a rule. Priya's world shrank to the confines of her bedroom, where she stared at the ceiling wondering how everything had collapsed so quickly. She tried to reason with her parents, to explain that her relationship was built on love and mutual respect. But her words fell on deaf ears. To them, it wasn't about love, it was about control, reputation, and the fear of being judged by their community. Priya was told she would be sent to India within the month to marry a man she had never met. Her protests were dismissed as childish rebellion. Priya knew she had to escape. The walls of her home had become a trap, and every hour felt heavier than the last. Her parents had made it clear she would be sent to India within weeks, married off to a stranger, and stripped of any autonomy she had fought to build. Her phone was gone, her laptop locked away, and her movements tightly monitored. But Priya wasn't ready to surrender. She still had one lifeline, a friend from university who had noticed her sudden disappearance and reached out in concern. Through whispered conversations and scribbled notes passed during temple visits, Priya managed to get a message to Jake. She told him everything, the discovery, the threats, the plan to exile her. Jake was devastated but focused. They agreed to meet at a bus station 2 towns over, far enough from Plano to avoid suspicion. Priya would sneak out late at night, carrying only essentials, and they would leave together. No more hiding, no more fear. She spent days preparing in silence. She memorized the route, timed the creaks in the floorboards, and watched for patterns in her family's behavior. Her mother often fell asleep early, and her father stayed up watching television. Arjun locked his door by midnight. On a rainy Thursday, the conditions were perfect. The storm masked her footsteps, and the darkness gave her cover. She packed a small bag, cash, ID, a change of clothes, and waited until 2 a.m. Slipping out through the back door, Priya felt her heart pounding. She didn't look back. She walked quickly, avoiding streetlights, heading toward the edge of the neighborhood where Jake had arranged a rideshare to pick her up. But something went wrong. She never made it to the station. Jake waited for hours, pacing, calling, hoping she was just delayed. But Priya never arrived. Her phone remained off, and no one answered her messages. By morning, Jake was frantic. He contacted the police and filed a missing person report. 2 weeks after Priya's disappearance, the silence surrounding her case began to crack. Jake had exhausted every option, calls to hospitals, shelters, and friends. The police had launched an investigation, but with no signs of foul play and a family insisting she had left for India, progress was slow. Still, something felt wrong. Priya hadn't said goodbye. There was no flight record, no passport scan, no trace of her crossing any border. Her sudden vanishing didn't fit the pattern of someone escaping freely. It felt like she had been erased. Then came the break. A hiker exploring a wooded area near Lake Ray Roberts, about 40 miles north of Plano, noticed something unusual, a patch of disturbed earth beneath a cluster of trees. The soil looked freshly turned, and a corner of fabric was poking through the dirt. He called the authorities. When investigators arrived, they uncovered a shallow grave. Inside was the body of a young woman wrapped in a bedsheet, her features barely recognizable, but her identity unmistakable. It was Priya. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The girl who had supposedly flown to India had never left Texas. Her body showed signs of blunt force trauma, and the condition of the grave suggested a rushed burial. Forensic teams moved quickly. They found tire tracks near the site, and soil samples matched the type found in Priya's backyard. The investigation shifted from missing person to homicide. Detectives began retracing Priya's final hours. Surveillance footage from nearby roads showed a van driving toward the lake in the early morning hours on the night she vanished. The van was registered to her father. A search of the family's garage revealed faint traces of blood on the concrete floor, partially scrubbed but still detectable. A shovel found in the trunk of the van had fingerprints matching her brother's. The evidence was stacking up. The family's story about Priya leaving voluntarily began to crumble. The investigation into Priya's death intensified as evidence mounted against her family. Detectives focused on the night she vanished, piecing together timelines, surveillance footage, and forensic clues. The van seen driving toward Lake Ray Roberts matched the one registered to Priya's father. Its tires left distinct impressions near the burial site, and soil samples from the grave matched those found in the Singh family's backyard. Inside the garage, investigators discovered faint blood traces on the concrete floor, partially cleaned but still detectable under luminol. The shovel recovered from the van carried fingerprints belonging to Arjun, her younger brother. Despite the mounting evidence, the family maintained their innocence. Priya's father insisted she had left for India willingly, claiming she was ashamed of her actions and wanted to start over. Her mother remained silent, avoiding interviews and refusing to cooperate. Arjun, once vocal and assertive, became withdrawn during questioning, offering vague answers and contradicting himself repeatedly. The inconsistencies in their statements only deepened suspicion. Prosecutors built a case around the concept of honor killing, a crime rooted in cultural control and the perceived shame Priya had brought upon her family. They argued that her relationship with Jake, a non-Indian man, had triggered a violent response from her father and brother, who saw her defiance as a threat to their reputation. The evidence suggested premeditation. The timing of her disappearance, the tools used, and the remote burial location all pointed to a deliberate act. The trial drew national attention. Media outlets covered every development, sparking debates about cultural expectations, generational conflict, and the hidden struggles of young women caught between tradition and independence. Community leaders condemned the violence, while others urged sensitivity in discussing cultural dynamics. After the trial ended, the community struggled to process the full weight of what had happened. Priya's story had pierced through cultural silence, exposing the hidden tensions many families faced but rarely spoke about. Her death was no longer just a tragedy. It had become a symbol of the cost of control, secrecy, and the refusal to let young women choose their own paths. News outlets continued to cover the aftermath, and advocacy groups began using her case to raise awareness about honor-based violence in immigrant communities across the United States. Jake, still grieving, gave a quiet statement outside the courthouse. He spoke not of vengeance, but of love, how Priya had wanted a life where she could be herself, where her choices weren't dictated by fear or tradition. He described her as brilliant, kind, and brave, someone who had tried to balance two worlds until the weight became unbearable. His words resonated far beyond the courtroom, sparking conversations in universities, religious centers, and family homes. Priya's mother disappeared from public view. Some said she moved to another state. Others believed she returned to India. She never spoke to the press, never attended memorials, and never answered questions about her role in the events leading up to Priya's death. Her silence became another layer of mystery in a case already filled with unanswered questions. A memorial was placed near Lake Ray Roberts, where Priya's body had been found. It was simple, a stone marker beneath a tree, surrounded by flowers and handwritten notes. One message read, "You deserve to be free." Another said, "We will not forget." People visited the site regularly, some leaving candles, others just standing quietly in reflection. Priya's story became part of college curricula, featured in sociology and criminal justice courses. Documentaries were made, podcasts recorded, and essays published.